The Bayonetta series is one of the most acclaimed hack-and-slash games ever made, well regarded for their stylish combos and complex combat systems. So, what if we took that and pretty much ignored all of it and used what some might consider the worst weapon in Bayonetta 2, Kafka. To explain why Kafka sucks, especially for a challenge run, as you can see, you can only equip it to Bayonetta's hands, not her feet. Therefore, we're literally banned from clicking the entire run, which gets rid of most of our combo potential. Otherwise, Kafka is a ranged weapon that can hit multiple foes with its arrows, at the drawback of having a slower rate of fire and startup time compared to the variety of handgun weapons Bayonetta has. On top of that, I decided that I will not be using any lollipops, so no healing. I cannot deal damage with any other weapon besides Kafka, but punish windows, Umbran torture devices, and Umbran climax are allowed, given I can only access them with Kafka anyway. If I die, I must restart the entire level that I'm on, and finally, I have to beat the game on hard mode, because I hate myself. So, can you beat Bayonetta 2 with only Kafka? Let's find out. World of Chaos is the prologue mission of Bayonetta 2, so in other words, it's just a tutorial level meant to get the player used to the game. Now, if you're familiar with Bayonetta, you know that given that we're not allowed to use our legs, we can't use Wicked Wees, which are powerful combo finishers that knock our opponents back. But given we cannot use it for this run, we have to settle for hanging back from range and dealing damage from afar. The final boss of this level, Gamora, is not even a problem. The flying levels let us use our ranged weapons of choice. In between saving up to use the Umbran climax to do big damage, well, big for Kafka, and dodging his telegraphed attacks to gain wish time, combined with a very opportune punish window that let us get off actually big damage with our summon, we're able to put away Gamora for good and move on to getting into the first real level of the game. Bayonetta rides into town with style atop a plane, and we waste no time traversing the streets of Noatun. My strategy for this run is to do only the mandatory fights whenever possible. You see, if I die doing an optional Muspelheim dungeon, for example, it still counts as a loss, and I would have to reset the level. As such, the first battle against a bunch of Catchets underwater goes swimmingly, well, as does the first 4 fight against a bunch of Angel Centaurs that corner me in a back alley, to which, despite having no combo potential with the Kafka, I still managed to net a platinum somehow. We reach the Cascade foregrounds where we encounter the secondary protagonist of the story, Loki, who seems to be doing a playing card only run for himself, so good luck to him. And for our part, we see here why saving up magic orbs, the meter you can see in the top left of the screen, is so important, as using the torture attack we saved up lets us take out an enemy instantly. And we quickly see the importance of it as we quickly get humbled. You see, don't let my massive HP bar fool you. Bayonetta cannot take a lot of hits, especially on hard mode, and we lose huge swaths of our health before we close out the fight. That leaves us with the mini-boss of the level, the sword-wielding Valiant. However, despite his stature, he isn't too hard. As you see, one of Kafka's few upsides is that it stuns the opponent when you finish firing a basic volley, which allows you to stun-lock the enemy for a while without being attacked. Valiant does manage to retaliate, managing to land a hard-hitting throw before nearly impaling us. But in the end, we land the necessary amount of damage to summon Madama Butterfly and send Valiant packing and netting myself a gold. Somehow. The second half of this game is a bit of a boss rush. We encounter, technically for the first time, the Catchet and Compassion enemy, which is literally just fodder, so we dispatch them quickly. We then encounter the hulking Urbane, which does give us a little bit more trouble. We dispose of it with a little bit of patience and careful positioning though. And finally we come to the final boss of the level, Glamour. Phase 1 of the battle with the massive snake monster is none too bad, as she only has a basic bite attack and can shoot icicles out of their mouth, both of which are pretty easy to dodge. In their second phase, we take to the skies on a slab of building. The battle is just as easy as before, as the attacks are telegraphed and simply adding a few new slash attacks to the mix. And even when we are hit, it's not enough to do serious damage. We win the fight and stomp Glamour out with Madama before finishing the level as shown here with a silver. And given I have platinums for every mission in this game, you better believe I'm not putting any of these scores into my record. But on to... This mission starts with Bayonetta's resident simp, Luca, trying to come to our rescue. We politely ignore him, unaware of the hardships that would soon fall upon us. The new introduction of this level are the strange torso-looking angels known as Enraptures, who act more like range support casters. In the first fight, their orbs are easy enough to deal with, and we get through it just fine. After dealing with a duo of Mjolnir-wearing angels, the two types combine in the third battle of the chapter, and as you can see, they've enraged the centaur, allowing it to be more aggressive and do more damage to me. I do deal with them, and heal slightly from the healing drops they leave behind for me when I'm confronted by the area boss, known as Beloved. I instantly have the fear of God put into me when a mere grab puts me directly in kill range of any other attack, which forces me to unload my Umbran Climax to try and do as much damage as possible while also pushing it back. From here, it was a matter of dodging perfectly before finally getting the scripted kill with our pack partner Bao, thereby completing the level and moving on to... This level closes out the early game with a bang, with a rematch with the Serpentine Angel Glamour on the side of a literal giant water twister. This is phase 1, and honestly, this phase demonstrates just how bad Kafka is as a weapon. You see, it's terrible at exploiting openings gained by getting witch time, dealing minimal damage. Nonetheless, with a little patience, we get the punish window and punch the creature into the vortex, starting phase 2. Which honestly is more the same, dodging rubble and the occasional attack from Glamour. Phase 3 is where things get interesting, where we take to the skies of heaven itself, alongside Glamour and two of its cronies. While it's not the fastest I've dealt with these guys, the first two are fairly easy to take down. The first one just tries to bite at you and spam ice attacks. The second crony spams an easily dodged blade move that you can easily get witch time off of. And before long, both of them are down, leaving me with a 1-on-1 showdown with Glamour. As you can see, Kafka is still doing minimal damage. I am lucky that most of the monster's attacks are predictable, simple to dodge bites, tail slashes, and floating blade attacks. Don't get me wrong, I do take damage off of a bite and a mistimed dodge on its tail slap, but after a fight that lasted far too long, 7 minutes in fact, Bayonetta decides to cut the fight short, and that is Chapter 3 completed, and now on to... The 2 meet is a step up in challenge. Sure, the starting fight with the octopus-like Fidelity was of little challenge, and we dispose of it quickly. The second fight of the chapter introduces us to a new threat. Angels wielding shields. And you know what shields are good at blocking? Oh, that's right, the Kafka. Now, if you manage to do enough damage to it, you can stance break the angel and open it up for a counter. I consider this to be the same level as punish attacks, which are legal only because I use Kafka to get access to it. Following that, we have a battle with another Urbane, which despite getting one hit off me was a fairly easy thing by this point, and I didn't even get hit by the laser that tried to fire at me. However, it is here where I encounter the first true hurdle of the run. The Masked Lumen. The Masked Lumen is a major problem. Small, humanoid enemies typically are the hardest for us to deal with. In phase 1, we start on the ground for our battle, where he can fire fireballs, a blue orb, he can do a holy weave with an angel, or he can charge at us with his spear and do a combo with it, or use his wolf form. Between his dodgy nature and his sheer aggression, he does a ton of damage to us before we manage to get him to round 2. And here is where I made my first mistake. You see, whilst we're fighting, and I'm doing only chip damage, he will occasionally power up his summon to do a massive attack that will do big damage to us. The only way I can even stop that move is if I use my Umbran Climax on that. But by the time I figure that out, Lumen strikes me down and deals me my first level restart. On the second try, I make sure to save up magic orbs in the fight against the Urbane before entering the battle fresher, and I managed to get past phase 1 much cleaner. Phase 2, whenever he looks like he's going to go for the charge attack, I use the Umbran Climax and unload on him to break his stance, and therefore break his attack, before shutting off the Umbran Climax to save my magic. Finally, after both of our summons end up taking each other out in a trade, we summon new summons in their place and make it to phase 3, where we both take to the skies on our wings. That said, this is a way easier phase than the last one, as it makes keeping distance from the masked Lumen far more manageable than keeping out of his deadly combos. And before I knew it, I burst them down, and we were on to phase 4. Phase 4 takes control away from Bayonetta, therefore doesn't count as part of the run. Even then, under the control of Madame Butterfly, we came very close to dying after a failed dodge, and only by securing some lucky dodges and wailing on the angel do I narrowly notch the level. This level finds us saving Loki from drowning, then returning to the water in our newly acquired snake form. We avoid some optional battles like the cowards we are. Then we dance on a strip pole that somehow warps time. Standard Bayonetta stuff. A first from this level is that we encounter our first infernal demon since the Prologue, the mechanical menace known as Pain. As you can see, my damage with Kafka still isn't great, and our only hope rests in that we can still somehow outrange the demon, and that its attack patterns are mercifully predictable, unlike the masked Lumen from earlier. And eventually, we dispatch the creature having taken minimal damage. We proceed to kick a simp in the balls before fighting angels on a ball. We do have to take control of Loki for a moment, but again, given I'm not playing as Bayonetta here, this doesn't count against me. So we stick a cool pose before we take control of Bayonetta for the double Urbane fight. The Kafka is really beginning to fall apart for me as a weapon. Without Wicked Weaves, it is extremely hard to space out enemies, and what's more, given its hard mo and my low DPS, I'm giving the enemy ample opportunity to hit me, which they do when they land both of their lasers near simultaneously to leave me almost dead. With my Umbran Climax, I do briefly stun lock the both of them, but it does little but speed up the fight as I take another Ice Beam to the face, leaving me at literally 1 HP. My only hope was to defeat the Ice Urbane first, collect the healing items it leaves when it dies, and then, just maybe, narrowly clinch out the win on the last Urbane, with again 1 HP, but still deathless. Now on to Bridge to the Heavens, similar to the Gates of Paradise, is a level around a one-on-one battle against a boss. In this case, the boss being the brother of Valiance himself, Valor. Phase 1 of the Valor fight was extremely easy, and dare I say, the fight with Valor is built around range builds in mind, given how he always stays at range. At one point, he kept spamming the same easy to dodge attack, which let me unload on him and quickly get the second stage of the fight. In Phase 2, we fight under the water, and here Valor has some slightly delayed attacks, but again we dodge them just fine. In fact, we don't take any damage whatsoever in the entire fight. Is Kafka getting good? No. We get a couple of Umbran Climaxes though to speed up the fight, and before you know it, we're being dragged down a hell, and we're on to This is another level that is primarily centered around boss fights, the first of which being against the humongous demon known as Insidious. The goal is to rain fire on its eyeball whilst trying to evade its myriad of attacks. The main phases of attack against each eyeball are interrupted by interim phases in which the monstrosity fires missiles upon us, which are used to build up magic orbs in preparation for later attacks. The attacks in the second phase are a little more intense, but honestly, we don't get hit a single time in the fight. The issue is just it's a slow, HP-ridden boss, but not hard at all, and we eventually bring the Insidious down. Inside of its stomach, we encounter new demon enemies, namely Hideous and Hatred, which will become common demon encounters going forward. They're fast, flighty, and attacking groups, and already I take damage on them where I didn't take any with Insidious, but I still make it through. But the real challenge is yet to come. The Masked Lumen rematch. If the original Masked Lumen was hard, this fight is even harder. 3 phases where the Lumen attacks relentlessly and doesn't let me stay at range or get time to myself, my only hope being to dodge and hope for good witch time windows to counter, but those counters don't last long, and Kafka's lack of damage output really lets the Lumen put some big damage on me. In an attempt to hasten the fight, during the start of each phase, I use my Umbran Climax to maximize damage output. By the time we get to the end of the fight, there is about a 1 minute portion near the end where I literally have no health. And you can see I am dodging like a madman trying to stay alive. Somehow, miraculously, by the grace of whatever, I managed to pull out with a win, probably with 1 HP to spare, closing out the arc with 0 deaths. Ancient Civilization starts a series of chapters where infernal demons become our major threat. We fight the demon dog Greed, which is not only fast, but does very fast damage. Then we have our first fight with a Golem, a shape-shifting automaton with a myriad of close and long-range attacks. I have begun to notice that slow, lumbering enemies are better for our Kafka to fight against as opposed to the small, agile enemies. Take a quick jaunt into Paradiso and battle a fire-wielding angel named Legions, who does big damage to us, but ultimately it is just an enemy reskin, and we finish it off with no issues. And just like that, we smash open one of the 2 barriers to the infernal gates, and we immediately almost perish to another Greed with some backup. We fight for our dear lives, very narrowly avoiding death, as you can see. In case you were wondering, I do heal after fights because there are very often random healing items scattered on the ground which heal you when you run into them, which are a godsend for this run. In a scuffle back in Paradiso, I show the reason why torch attacks are so crucial to this run. Remember those early shield enemies? Well, we were able to heavily weaken it using a torture attack, which allows us to take it out with relative ease when it would otherwise have proven problematic. From there we defeat the last of the angels, get into an underwater battle with a trio Fidelity, which isn't too bad, run away from a giant golem, put a pain into the dirt with relative ease, and before long, we shatter the second barrier and we're on to... Honestly, this really is a continuation of the previous level. We encounter this bird-like demon called Malicious, who acts more like a backline mid-range unit with low defense, as you can see by the damage we're doing, which is good for a Kafka. We meet another Urbane, and by now I think you know what we do to Urbanes, don't you? The final golem fight in the area is a little tedious, and we do take stupid damage to it. It's mildly aggressive, with tight dodge windows and a lot of variable attacks, and high HP, all of which are bad for the Kafka, meaning we have to settle in for a long siege with the creature. Thankfully, Kafka's stun lock ability when used with Umbran Climax is as useful as ever, and we do eventually take it down, leading to our first battle against Lopter. Given the battle is in the air, it isn't too dissimilar from the earlier masked Lumen battles, and mercifully he uses less melee attacks and more range attacks. He is no pushover, and with one simple combo he reduces me to 1 HP. Again, and he still has a full bar of health left. I clutch up, however, and between uses of Witch Time, we're able to slowly yet surely whittle down his health and take advantage of the fact that he uses really only ranged attacks, and we manage to win in the game, but get our ass kicked in the cutscene. But otherwise, ending the level and moving us on to... As you may have guessed, for the crime of doing this run, we wound up in Hell. The Depths is probably the single longest level in the game by way of having the most fights, and with time running out for Jean, we hurry to get through it. To do that, we end up falling down a centipede-ridden hole before coming to a DMC reference boss fight. Phantasmarane is a pretty easy boss fight, all things considered. It's probably because I was platinuming this game back in the day, and I spent the most time in this level trying to platinum it, so I have plenty of experience. We avoid its massive fire attacks, and eventually slay the giant arachnid. From there we battle the snake-like resentment, but considering it has a beam that can turn you into a child then eat you, I basically just aggro it down before it can do anything. Next on the gauntlet is Sloth, a fixed sword-wielding demon that has a propensity for dodging Kafka's slow-moving arrows. And frankly, it is a bit of annoying. The strategy is to fish for Witch Time openings, mostly by baiting its jump attack or its slash attack, and stay as close to it as you can so it has less time to dodge the arrows. It can be erratic, but in no time it goes down. We meet our local weapon merchant Rodan here, who helps us in the next fight. And when I say help, I mean really helps us. And by that I mean one-shots all the enemies he comes to contact with. I mean, just look at how he utterly devastated these enemies that normally causes us so much trouble. Basically, I do next to nothing and let him deal with it, but with that over, we finally get to Inferno and its ruler is another 1v1 boss level, where we confront the monster who kidnapped John's soul, the Mistress of Insanity herself, Alrune. Phase 1 Alrune remains relatively humanoid, and I thought we'd be in for some big trouble, and well, I certainly didn't get out of it scot-free. Alrune's big gimmick here is that she can occasionally summon flowers to help her, which can spit acid and frankly are simply a nuisance. So my strategy was to always take the flowers out before they can become a major problem. As for Alrune herself, she has a few basic attacks, her claw swipes, her tail slash, and a charge attack that comes out infrequently. In this phase, it's simply a matter of reading her fairly telegraphed attacks and preventing the flowers from taking over the screen. Soon enough, we enter her second phase, where she turns into an absolute behemoth. Second phase Alrune abandons the summoning flower gimmick and instead relies on good old-fashioned brute strength and speed. She incorporates a few new attacks such as a pouncing bite, an arena-wide bullet storm, as well as a suction attack, but is generally more aggressive than her phase 1 self. Lucky for me, she is just as prone to being stun-locked by Umbran climaxes as any other boss. And although it takes quite a bit of good dodging and positioning to get the most out of the Kafka, we eventually win and Alrune finally goes down. Well, this chapter may as well be a solo battle, as the first part involves riding on one of Bayonetta's demons through hell. Given I don't control Bayonetta here, I don't count this against the run. The real meat of the chapter is our final battle against our longtime rival, the Masked Lumen, who was revealed to be Baldur from the first game. Baldur is not an easy fight, as he ramps up everything that made him a problem tenfold. He is fast, aggressive, gets in your face. He even has moves that can hit you after you witch time the first part of the move, meaning getting witch time openings for Kafka is harder than ever, and he likes to get me in his time stop, which leaves me open to attack. I whittle him down to half HP and eventually we get to the second phase of the fight, but by that point I've just been chipped down too hard and Baldur again gets his second kill on the run on me. Okay, no big deal, I restart the level and I'm back in the fight. Phase 1 is not going any better, but I am already taking big damage from stupid mistakes on my part. And by the time I make it to Phase 2, while I'm more consistent about getting hits in, and I even dodged the giant feather attack that killed me last time, he still manages to get me down to one hit from death. Knowing it was do or die, I managed to beat him down until he was only down to his last health bar remaining, and at that time I spammed the ever-living hell out of my Umbran Climax Stunlock to obliterate the last of his HP, clinching the fight and moving on to In this chapter we travel back to the past to some familiar Bayonetta 1 vistas, namely the city of Vigrid during the witch hunts, and joining us for this mission we have Bayonetta's mother Rosa, who tags along and provides aid. Most of the fights are pretty trivial, and even the battle with the massive Angel Fortitudo was relatively easy. Our problems really started when we encountered the Angel Dog duo, which gave me way more trouble than they really should have at this level, followed by a roadblock I never saw coming when I started this run. That this disgusting beloved could just throw the bridge we were fighting on into the lava and instantly kill me. We may be in trouble here. Well, with that being the third death of the run, I rushed back through the level to try again, this time with the strategy of saving every orb I can so I can use it against the troublesome angel. And it works. With liberal uses of Umbran Climax, we barely scrape through the fight, draining its health bar before it can throw us into the lava. From there we have one more encounter with every Bayonetta 1 player's worst nightmare, and then we have one last encounter with the pesky, now lava-roasted, beloved. The boss is slow-moving and predictable, which is great for Kafka, and it has an insane amount of HP, which is terrible for Kafka. Thankfully, Rosa draws some of its aggro away, and with enough time and patience, we're able to defeat the medium well-wrapped Scallion with little difficulty. And he becomes the instrument of some lovely mother-daughter bonding. With that out of the way and him dead, we move on to The entirety of this chapter is played within an Umbran mech suit. I suppose technically, unlike our demons, Bayonetta was piloting it, but I literally have no choice in the matter, literally for the entire chapter. But for those of you who are literal about their challenge runs, no, you cannot beat Bayonetta 2 with only Kafka. But for those of you who don't count force vehicle levels, we move on to... We're now on the penultimate level. The first part of the level is basically a tower defense segment where me and Rosa have to fight waves upon waves of enemies in order to defend the clock tower. Although it can be hectic at times, we inevitably do pull through. The next fight is a battle against Temperantia, the Storm Angel. Although he does slug me for some serious damage to the fight, we managed to whittle him down all the same. I've played so much Bayonetta 1 where he's from, I doubt I'd ever actually lose to him. The angels wind up destroying the clock tower we were defending, and the third battle takes place on a floating slab of wall of that very tower, which, whilst a very neat callback to the original game, was easy to overcome given it's full of just fodder. Then comes our second battle against Lopter, now disguised as Loki. Oh boy, another battle just like the masked Lumen. Do you think we'll win this one? No. That's our fourth death. While playing the level to get back to the fight, I quickly come up with a new strategy. Get as close to Lopter as possible. Whilst it might sound risky on the surface, in all reality is risky, the idea is that it baits him into his easier to dodge melee strikes, which opens him up to close range Kafka fire. This actually works, and at one point the coward even tries to throw a freaking meteor at us, but luckily good old Madama Butterfly simply headbutts it out of existence and we return to the normal battle. Honestly, this isn't much more to say to this battle. Certainly Lopter gave it as good as he got, but thanks to liberal use of the Umbran climax to hasten the fight, and sticking near him at all times, we clear his HP bar, and we proceed to die to the very next encounter. Death number 5 to some random enemies. The next attempt, I simply hide in a corner like a coward I am and snipe them down. No way in hell I intend to fight Lopter a fourth time, believe you me. Well, while we watch our mother die, we move on to... the final level of the challenge. And we started off with a random vehicle segment that doesn't even count toward the run because Jean has us trapped on a plane. Once we get onto the ground though, Bayonetta and Baldur confront Lopter for the last time, and honestly, my strategy for the Lopter phase is pretty much the same as the last one. Get up close and bait out melee moves. However, this Lopter is far more aggressive and does get hits off on me, and it's just as risky as the last one, if not more so, but we do make it to phase 2 if a bit battered. Aesir, God of Chaos. And as you might have guessed, between his absolutely insane attacks, ones that force you to dodge 2 to 3 times just to get clear of the damage, and he does big damage himself, it's not long before we go down for our 6th death. On the next attempt, we managed to get him down to phase 3, which is a flying battle, much like some of the previous masked Lumen battles, and even managed to make him summon his giant satellite before we get killed for our 7th death. But hey, at least we got to hit him with a satellite though. On the winning run, we finally managed to be more competent in predicting his attacks and build much needed magicka to fuel our Umbran climaxes once we have his health extremely low. And in a last ditch effort, we try to DPS his health down so we can finish him off. And it works. We finally beat Aesir. All that is left is just a squishy shell of his former self, which we immediately just gun down. Baldur and Bayonetta do a father-daughter dance to summon a literal god, who then drop kicks Aesir into a dinosaur demon's mouth. That's a long way of me saying, not only can you beat the final boss of Bayonetta 2 with the Kafka, but if you don't count the vehicle sections, then huzzah! You can beat Bayonetta 2 with only the Kafka. Well, there you have it, folks. One of the first Bayonetta 2 challenge runs on YouTube, and 3 days of my life I'll never get back. If I had to rate my run on difficulty, I would say about a 7, which incidentally is how many times we died. 2 times we died to Baldur, 1 time we died to the Lava Beloved, 1 time we died to Lopter, 1 time we died to Grace and Glory, and 2 times we died to Aesir. Not too difficult, most of it is tedium and not making little mistakes, due to the length of most of the fights. I would say it's more difficult than almost all of my Metroid challenge runs, with the exception of the Metroid 2 remake with only missiles. That one was hell on earth. If you stuck around to the end, please consider giving it a like, share, and subscribe to support more videos like this from me. Anyway, I leave you. Be safe, be wise, and please pray for a true peace in space.